Hello and welcome to Wednesday Wisdom with Will, our latest series where we talk about everything generative AI, what we are learning. We'd like to share that with the ecosystem. And to really bring focus to this conversation is Will Poole, co-founder Capria Ventures. Hi, Will.
Hello, Sandhya.
Well, I want to start today's conversation around something I read that Bill Gates said. And, for people who don't know, you worked with Bill Gates for a long time, over a decade, when you led the Windows business. And Bill said this, and I'm just paraphrasing here. He said, when you introduce tools, give people tools, and they use their natural capabilities and curiosity, many wonderful things can happen, really setting the context of the potential of the latest, most foundational tool of today's time, generative AI. So that's one aspect of things. And then I read Gary Marcus's article where he talks about an impending bubble, very much like the dot-com bust, right? And to add to his article, I read what Sequoia said. Sequoia estimated that AI spend was about $50 billion on NVIDIA chips to build AI models, right? And with a revenue of just about 3 billion. These are very contrasting ends of what the possibility and the bust. Will, asking you, what is the situation? How do we look at these two ends of the spectrum here?
Well, as we've established before, I'm an optimist, and Bill is an optimist as well. And the comments that he made probably were made in the context of both operating systems and developer tools going back to sometime in the early 90s. And he was right then, and he's right now. At Microsoft, we provided open access to Windows, to internet technologies, to all kinds of developer tools. And then by the tens of millions, developers created things that we could not have imagined, and they still do. And I think that same concept is applying to generative AI. Gary Marcus, I always enjoy reading him. He's really is an outspoken AI curmudgeon, and I think his voice does help to cut through some of the euphoric froth that we all see in this market. And I, for example, do agree that we're in a bubble. I think that many people would say that we're in a bubble, even those investing into it, which we'll get to in a moment. But I do not believe it's going to burst the way Gary suggests. It's not going to be like a 2000 dot bomb. It's not going to be like the economic crushing impact of 2008. So I think that there's just too much underlying intrinsic innovation happening today, value creation happening today for any kind of a bubble burst at that magnitude. There will be unquestionably a correction, but I do not think it's going to be a burst. And then coming back to the point on Sequoia and their recent comments, look, I'm sure their math is accurate, and it seems very clear what they're saying, but I'm pretty confident that their math prowess has not stopped them from investing into this bubble. So I think that the people that are investing now have to be wise about how they do it, and it's going to be interesting times.
Thanks for that. No, and you've said that well, right? We're still learning, but staying with the bubble, but in a different lens. I want to move to our section, What Keeps Will Up at Night. You referenced in your previous response about what investors are up thinking about. Where should they be investing? But I want to think about founders. You yourself have been a founder. And how should founders be thinking about scarce resources as we navigate what could be or couldn't be a bubble, Will?
Well, look, the reality is that if you are a software founder and software services, anything in that domain, and you're raising money, you definitely have to lean into the hype a bit, maybe more than you feel comfortable with, because if you don't, checkbooks are just not going to open in the venture capital world. And I'll give you an example of that. I was an e-commerce founder back in the early 90s. And in 1993, the Mosaic browser shipped. This was the very beginning of the web becoming available to everybody. And if within, I'd say about a year, if you did not have a very clear, quote, internet strategy or web strategy, you did not get any money. And so we and many other founders, pivoted quickly, and it worked. I think the same kinds of things are happening now. You can read about people that have pivoted from doing Web3 and Bitcoin kind of work, things in the crypto domain, and pivoted into AI very successfully. There's many common skills, many common hardware investments as well. So pivoting is the right answer, or minimally leaning into it to get access to funding. Now, a final bit of advice that I gave to founders starting back in January of last year, which is don't make any commitments in the AI space that you can't undo within a month or so, particularly not in the GenAI space. And the reason for that is just the pace of innovation. It's unprecedented, as we all know. And so if you get stuck going down a path and you're on the model that turns out not to be the winning model, or you're not model agile, or you've gone down an architectural path that locks you into a certain direction, you might find yourself in trouble. So highly recommend being agile and experimenting, failing fast, and making sure that you can follow the innovation that's accelerating so fast.
I want to stay with the founder lens as we move to our section, What's Up Global South. Capria is focused entirely on the Global South when we invest. What GenAI has done is it's become a great language equalizer. And being a language equalizer has meant that the TAM has suddenly increased, right? Allowing founders and businesses to think about different geographies and expansion. But along with this comes along regulatory issues. Different geographies have different regulations. And in the context of generative AI, discovering what that means. And there's a potential bubble. How should founders be preparing, or can they be prepared to better handle different regulatory requirements that will come up as they build their businesses?
We've touched on this before, and undoubtedly we're going to touch on it again, because regulation is an issue that every founder really needs to keep their eyes on. And let me tell you what the top three things that would be keeping me up at night as a applied GenAI founder. Now, the first one is data security and privacy. And this is a big concern starting well over a year ago. And from a technical perspective, it's really been addressed in many ways. But the fact is that even to this day, enterprise IT leaders are really concerned, and appropriately so, about what does AI mean when it touches all of their corporate data. So it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of expensive pre-sales efforts to convince enterprises that a GenAI solution is going to treat their data the way they want. That's going to maintain security, privacy, and everything else. And that's just not going to happen overnight, and be ready for that. Many people are already suffering from those long sales cycles. The second area that will keep me up at night is copyright. And this, again, we can do an entire session on this one because it's a complex legal issue. It's one that it's going to require new laws. The old laws written 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, longer, are not really going to address the reality that we're facing here. They'll need to be changed. They're going to need to be updated, maybe entirely new laws established. And the final thing to think about is the concept that's well understood as what's called a regulatory capture. And if you don't know that term by name, I recommend doing some reading about it. But in short, what it really says is that the wealthy startups and the incumbent, multi-trillion-dollar at this point value cap companies are going to use their relationships with with regulators, to get new regulations passed that, let me be clear here, that disproportionately disadvantage their smaller competitors.
And, as founders prepare to deal with regulations in the best way they can, they have to keep innovating and moving ahead. And our next section is all about innovation and breakthrough. We recently, I mean Capria Ventures, recently led an 6 million investment in GoFlux in Brazil, a company that's focused on digitizing and financing agri-freight. And I remember from our conversations that you were very impressed with how the founders, their vision, and how they're thinking about the industry, one of the reasons why we invested in them. How are they thinking about generative AI? And also zooming out a bit, what can generative AI do for agri-freight?
What's really interesting is when you start thinking about how GenAI can help these guys, and there's really two different places that the GoFlux marketplace can get even better with GenAI. The first one is, if you think about, they're going to have the data on what happens with all of these major producers shipping all this huge amount of agricultural product every season, right? And that data is going to create a huge base of knowledge from which you can apply traditional and advanced machine learning technologies to predict and forecast what might happen next. And by adding AI to help the producers sort out what's going on, it's going to help make them able to get what they need to get done more efficiently, more quickly, more cost effectively. The second thing is that this platform creates lots of information, and GoFlux creates a report on a regular basis that rolls all this up, and it's a fairly large, complicated, data-rich report, and that's provided to, and it's a vital service that's provided to their clients. Well, trying to traverse and get the information out of that complex report when you have a quick ad hoc query you need to do. And so being able to use natural language interface to do complex ad hoc query of this information and come up with a well-formed answer along with citations, so you know that it's not hallucinating. They were going to be able to ground their answers with citations, show their customers where the information is coming from, and help them make smarter decisions quickly. So those are two areas where a smart B2B SaaS marketplace is going to make good use of AI technologies to produce a better product for their customers.
It's really exciting every time we speak and, put GenAI in the perspective of our founders. You learn something new, and I'm sure founders listening to our conversations learn something new. And whether Gary Marcus thinks this is a bubble or not, there's just lots to wait and watch. And thank you, Will, for Wednesday Wisdom with Will. And until our next conversation.
Thank you, Sandhya.